Welcome to Bonehead. I'm Joe Lewis. Why the hell do I?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Anyway, welcome to Bonehead. Today we have a special guest star, and who is that?
Returning victim,
Mick Strawn.
Mick Strawn!
Yay! New phone books are here.
I'm your fourth. I'm your fourth. Well, Haley's your fourth, but I'm like the fifth Beatle.
Well, the thing
Bonehead.
is you're not technically our first guest star, and I'm not poo-pooing our first people, but you're our first one that actually worked in the industry. And we had a great episode a while back with Andre, Alex, and we would never have had that without you. So I want to go ahead and give you one more thank you at the beginning of this, and then I'll stop kissing your ass.
I won't.
I mean,
well, I love a good tickle as well as anybody. Andre did a great job though. He
really
kind of
did.
Flips me there.
he really did. I was so jealous of him as he sat there and drank and smoked a cigar. So during the whole episode, it was great.
And you know what the thing is like I told you, Andre is the man's man, right?
Yeah.
You know? And the fact that he was like drinking a scotch and ripping down on a cigar, you know, as he's doing it, you know, it could have been Arnold.
No, it was great. It was great. And he had so many good stories and stuff. But anyway, we're happy to have you back. Before we get started, and I know you complimented me on this before, and I do appreciate you doing it, even though it was behind closed doors. Don't ask. I want to go ahead. You got your own podcast now, brother. You're moving up in the world.
Have you listened to it?
Yeah, I listened to about 5 minutes of it 2 minutes ago.
What'd you think?
I'm screwing with you. I'm sorry. Love you.
But you know,
You're still my bottom bitch.
I think one thing that's interesting. I was actually listening to your commentary on downsizing.
Oh right, yeah.
And where you mentioned that being able to remove yourself from what you already know about making effects and stuff like that. I thought that was really interesting because that was one of the questions I did have was how do you do that where you know what goes into it?
That's, you know, it's an interesting thing that as soon as the more that I began to learn about film, the less often that it happened that all of a sudden I was totally sucked into the story.
That's how you know it's a good movie, right?
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Is when your mind just does the full trick because
Right.
Well, you know, it's sort of like the persistence of vision thing that actually makes films possible. Is our persistence of vision makes it so that we don't see frame by frame by frame by frame by frame, right? And it's kind of like that illusion when all of a sudden I lose myself in the film. You know, all of a sudden it's just persistence of vision. That's all I can see. I can just see the story in front of me. And I tell you, the first time that I totally remember it happening was I had gotten more and more into the business, and I'm just watching, and everything was very, you know, analytical, you know.
Yeah.
And then Field of Dreams came out, and for some reason that film was like the first one when I was in the business that all of a sudden I watched the whole film and I couldn't tell you a thing about how it was done at all because I was just totally into it, totally
Really?
there.
Okay. Chad and I have talked about this before, and I'll tell a story about your wife. You'll be sitting and watching a movie, and his wife's not really into movies, and he'll go, this is going to happen in X amount of time and X amount, and she'll think he's a soothsayer. Like he's able to look into the future. And the thing is, and you know much more about the technical way of how films are made.
Or let's face it, when you're watching, you know, Law and Order, right? And 5 minutes into it, some guy that you've seen before is the owner of a hot dog cart, right?
Yeah, right.
And you never see him again in the rest of the show. He's the one that did it.
Right. Yeah. And the first suspect's never it. Like an episode of House, the first thing that they guess is obviously not it. It's not going to come out to the third act.
Exactly.
Or
I
whatever.
mean, you know,
It's not
and there
lupus.
could be
It's
the
never
false-
lupus.
there
It's
could be
never
a
lupus.
false cure, right?
Right. It's absolutely. It's never lupus. So I mean, and these are genres, and genre is nothing more than expected outcomes, right?
Oh, yeah.
So anyway,
See, that's a great bumper sticker. It's never lupus.
it's never lupus.
Yeah.
So anyway, what I was saying is, we've talked about that because that's kind of how we gauge it. If I don't see it coming, or if I don't care, like I'm so into
Right.
that story going on of ever how well it's done that I'm not even trying to figure it out. I'm just enjoying it as I go. That's the marker of a really good movie.
Even a few times during it this time, and I have to tell you, I was watching it, and I was totally sucked in, totally not even thinking about any of my usual analytical crap.
Right.
And then the guy waved at them with a rubber arm that was so obvious.
Because it just comes out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
and thing is it was bending here, right? It's waving with the rubber arm, and I went, well, that's a rubber arm, and that was it. The rest of the film, I was analytical, and well, this is this, and that's that gag, and that's this gag.
Oh, damn it, Mick. Now when I rewatch it, I'm going to pay attention to the arm.
Oh, come on.
And our producer Haley's over here shaking her head in agreement too.
Oh, yeah, but I didn't notice it because I was into it. Another one is John Carpenter's The Thing, and Rob Bottin did all those, those great effects.
That's a good example.
That's a good example of great practical effects. But anyway, because it's when the Norris monster bites the arms off of the doctor, and it's kind of here, and you clearly see the gelatin, but until it's pointed out to you, and that it's cut off here, but that actually the arms are moved up here.
Yeah.
Oh, and then it's like, son of a bitch. You
know
see it
what?
every single time from that point on.
The great thing about that film was that you couldn't figure out why it kept evolving into all these different things.
Yeah.
It didn't make any sense at all, but it was so freaking cool.
It's so cool.
Let it happen. Let it be.
And it doesn't matter because
No logic needed.
I was watching it back right before Christmas. It was just happened to be on, and every single practical effect in that practical effect in that movie holds up. It's the stop motion that looks like shit now.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but it didn't really look great at the time, except for one when the spider monster goes across the floor with the little legs moving. That's clearly just a little remote control car. That's the only one that doesn't really hold up. We're getting off topic. So sorry. But anyway,
Yeah,
get
it
back
was
to
a lot of fun. We had a topic?
Not really, but let's get back to your podcast. So, how are you doing it? Where can they find it? Let's talk about that.
Okay, my podcast is called Dream Warrior Review.
Yeah.
It's basically another film review. I mean, we kind of do
with a white guy.
Horror. What?
With another white guy. We make this joke all the time.
I was gonna say, what does that have to do with anything we're talking about?
I just hate chalkies.
Look, I'm not living in LA anymore. I live in Kennewick, Washington. Hey, wait a minute. He's married to a black woman. He is, and they just had a baby.
Oh, this is something you hear?
No, I'm telling you.
Oh, okay.
You said another white guy, yes, but he's married to a black woman. She's beautiful and she's funny, and she sticks her head. She gave him a light that says on the air.
Uh-huh.
On air light.
Yeah.
This is to put it in the studio. Nobody ever comes into the studio.
We got that tattooed on Joe's ass.
Yeah.
It's a big tattoo. It's a big tattoo. So, yeah, your podcast, so how did it get started?
Like I say, my son was renting a house out that his first house.
Yeah.
And I was over there helping prep it, and this couple came in, and for some reason the guy and I just totally hit it off, and I kept saying, going by and saying, let's go see a movie. Let's go see a movie. Finally, I dragged him to a movie, and we then discussed the movie To the Living Death. And then after a while, I kind of said, well, I was a production designer for years, and I found out that all the films that I'd done, he was fans of them, right? Nightmare on Elm Street 3. So
Imagine
I
that.
went from there.
Yeah.
Kind of went from there. And we didn't make any huge. He had all the equipment. He's in radio. He's a radio salesman, and every once in a while he guest DJs around here. And Kirk Thomas was born, and we've been doing great. Dream Warrior Review. Come on, come all.
Absolutely. Selfless.
It's a very loose,
shameless plug.
But it's a loose review film because it's actually just an excuse for me to tell stories.
Yeah, which you're really good
So
at.
half of it's the two of us bantering back and forth, and then the rest of it's which we call story time, which has got this fun little tag on it. And story time. My granddaughter absolutely loves the show, and my son. At the very beginning, when I said, "Well, it looks like we're doing a podcast," because the podcast actually happened before we decided we were actually doing a podcast.
It happened.
And as it has happened, my son has been like, "Oh, well, you should listen to this, and you should listen to that, and you should listen to this, and you should see how these people do it this way and that way." And of course, I ignored him entirely, as I did all throughout my career. People said, "You should go see this." And I would say, "Hey, I'll get right on that." And I would never do that. And so it's kind of evolved into what it is now, which is basically me telling a story and us laughing a lot.
So you also have a book coming out next year. You want to talk about that?
That's right. Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Making of, Behind the Screams. You like the title?
I do.
I like Behind the Screams,
Yeah. Did you work all night on that? I'm being a smart ass.
No,
So for somebody...
To tell you the honest truth, it was like Blake was making the announcement that we're going to be writing this book on one of the Facebook pages for Nightmare on Elm Street. And at the end of the announcement, somebody types in and goes, "Well, what's the book going to be called?" And he calls me up and goes, "What do you want to call a book?" And I go, Behind the Screams. That was it. My mouth said it. My mouth did it. My mouth named it by itself. Had nothing to do with my head, my brain, or anything. It was spitting teeth, baby. Spitting teeth.
I have so many jokes. Well, that's cool. How did you meet Blake? So we met you and Blake. It's Blake Best, right? Mm-hmm. We met you and Blake at Scarefest this past year. Did you guys know each other before then, or did you?
Oh yeah. Blake is the first one. I didn't really. I think I've been on Facebook for 7 years, but 4 years of that I never even looked at it.
Right.
But then when my sister died, and we moved up here to Washington, just before we moved, I was talking to Rachel Talalay, and Rachel Talalay goes, "You do realize that you have a fan base," and I didn't even know what the hell a fan base was.
And real quick, Rachel Talalay is one of the people that worked on all the Nightmare on Elm Street films except for the fifth one, right? And she directed. Her husband
worked on the fifth.
Oh, really? I saw in the documentary that her husband worked on the fifth one and she was doing something else.
Okay, that's possible.
Okay, and she directed Part 6, Freddy's Dead.
Right.
And for you Who fans out there, she's been directing Doctor Who. She's been killing it. She actually just directed the Christmas episode.
She's the one that does the Christmas episodes. This is her third, I believe. Yeah.
Right. Well, I don't know anything about Who, but my wife loves Who, and I always go, "Oh my God, Rachel Talalay!" And she goes, "I don't give a shit."
Rachel Talalay is one of the most awesome human beings.
Yeah.
She is. You know where we met? We met on Sid and Nancy.
Oh yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, way back when she was doing locations.
Oh really? So, what's the guy's director's name? Repo Man. What's the name of the director? I completely forgot his name. Alex Cox. That's right. He directed Repo Man. Absolutely. Sorry, this is us geeking out.
And I worked. This is crazy connections. I worked with Linda Burbank, Ray Fox. They were the ones that were in Britain that I worked with here. So I art directed here to put together the sets and everything for the Chelsea Hotel and all the rest of that, and the sets for all the bars. I art directed all of those in California while they were coming from Britain to New York to here doing the exteriors.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, you need to get us. Go ahead.
Rachel was there with me, and so everything all came together, and then so Rachel says, you have a fan base, and I said, really? I mean, there's other people out there who might even know what my name is, and she goes, oh my God, you have no idea, and it has been fairly true. Say now. And she goes, you should think about the legacy that you're leaving behind. It never occurred to me that there was such a thing.
Well, it was a job, right? I mean, I'm sure you loved movies, but
it was like, this is something I was talking to Andre about.
Yeah.
Andre goes like this, when he was done talking with you guys, I'm talking to him on the phone. He goes, Mick, don't you wish that you could have seen in the future to see what it was that you worked on that would be really popular, because we could have just cut those sets up into 1 foot squares and made a freaking fortune.
Oh, and yeah. Because we talked to him about that. Yeah, he was just talking about you'd roll in a dumpster and just start throwing shit away.
Oh, the biggest problem in LA is that there's no money for storage. I mean, storage is like $800. It costs $800 a month to store something in a 10 by 10 container, right?
Jeez.
And that right there means that the thing that is your biggest headache at the end of a show is getting rid of all that crap. And one of the easiest ways to get rid of it is everybody has decisions that they have to make about doing reshoots and crap like that. So what you do is you always, things that are in the middle of a dispute, you put into a storage locker, and then you hand the key to the production, and you wait and see how long it takes before somebody goes in and sells the locker for $20.
Wow.
Because they're paying thousands of dollars a month just to store it.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But if we had only known, I mean, I think of all the things on all these films that have passed through my hands. But you're right. The thing is the next film you have to do is the only thing that you're thinking about, and it goes on and on and on. Because
it's kind of this is things we were talking about this before the episode about cons. They only want actors. They never really want to talk to production people. But for production, it's very much a blue collar attitude, right? It's the next show. You got to get it done.
Yes.
It's your next job. You're looking for work. If you're lucky like Andre, you've been on the same job for a long time. You got a lot of security.
And that's very rare. That's really rare.
And it's really rare. So you're always kind of looking for work or whatever the next job is, and that's what you're worried about. So
right.
I got a weird question that just popped into my head, and I'm sorry, and I feel like I'm taking over from the other two. What's the biggest surprise of something that you worked on that you thought was either a piece of crap or a piece of shit or something like that, and that people still talk about it to this day, that you get brought up? What'd you say?
I have two that just amaze me.
What?
The first one is Critters 2.
Yeah.
God, it's one of our favorites.
But you know what?
Oh my God!
My
God! Who the hell knew? I mean, I built a whole town for them because I was kind of like the guy that you brought in to do the big non-budget, low budget thing, and we have to do this incredibly big thing.
Yeah.
I was the guy to do it. But the thing is Critters 2 is more popular than Critters.
It is.
It is. And rightly so.
But the other one is this, and I don't know, and this surprised the hell out of me. Just about 4 years ago, my daughter Kaki, was at a party. She goes, and it was an 80s party, and so they were showing a film that I had seen before. And she's saying she's seen this film before at 80s parties, and it's called Breakin' 2.
Electric Boogaloo.
Here's the thing. I said, what? I said, and she says, not kidding, but we're looking and the credits are running up, and all of a sudden I see your name. And I go, oh my God, the guy is everywhere. And I went, Critters 2? I mean, Breaking 2? How did that make it through all this, right?
I think that gets thrown out a lot, though, in different shows. Because I know even Mystery Science Theater 3000, which is known for mocking bad films, never made fun of that film. But anytime it was a sequel they were making fun of, they would say, I don't know, Boggy Creek 2, Electric Boogaloo.
I think it's the title, because nobody talks about Breaking.
No,
right?
I have never seen Breaking.
Right.
I have never seen the first one.
But I have seen Breaking 2.
Well, let me give you an example of this. There was two films that I was up for when I did Nightmare on Elm Street 3. And I think that you guys have heard my whole spiel on Nightmare on Elm Street 3 being the first of the thirds that actually became big. Mm-hmm. Because until that time you made the first film, and then the second film got a quarter as much money, right? Right. And that's what happened. And then Bob Shea comes in and says, well, we're going to break the mold here, because that's all you got. You got two films, right? Mm-hmm. There wasn't these huge, franchises that go up to 10 or 11 or 13 and reboot and do this and this. And this. That didn't exist back then. What you had was Bob Shea going, well, you know what? We're going to turn this around. And it was done by creating a group that has a chance. The Dream Warriors, they had a chance in that story now, because they were going to get together and they were going to fight. That was the one element that was different. The other element is we took it onto a stage and we just blew the look out. I mean, we went into a dream. We did weird sets and stuff like that, and we made Freddy a character.
Yeah. Now, can I ask you a really quick question about that? And I'm not taking anything away from the production design, but how much of the success also relies on the fact that that movie's written by Frank Darabont?
Well, yeah. I mean,
original Wes Craven did the first version, but it's
right. But you see, it was a great story. But the thing is, think of it this way: run that in your head without Freddy being funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, doesn't work, does it?
No, not really. And that's also directed by Chuck Russell.
And it was written to something that Robert Englund did well. Robert Englund was a great cut-up. He had physical, he had this physical look that he could do all these bends and stand just right and stuff like that. But what he really did is he sold this kind of evil humor. Mm-hmm. And that was the first time that you saw it, and it was really, really successful.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Yeah, actually, I saw an interview with Rachel Talalay where she said the reason 4 was so successful was because of 3, in her opinion. Because people love 3, that the reason 4 was even more successful.
I also think that the only person that we had to beat was ourselves. Yeah. I mean, we didn't have writing. I mean, let's face it, that was an art department. I spent in the art department on a non-union film, I spent $1.1 million.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. Yeah. Nobody ever said no.
Yeah.
Nobody said no because we didn't have writing to make it up, and we didn't have, great story arcs to make it up. So I said, well, my idea on 3 and on this one is that they're going to be a roller coaster, but let's consider number 3 was the roller coaster that you get in the parking lot of Walmart. And this is Disneyland, right?
Now, 4 is directed by Rennie Harlan. Yeah. Chad went, I like Cliffhanger. And I like 4, but I
like Cutthroat Island.
Oh, God. Sorry, we're getting off topic here. But now, was it the script was never done because of the writer's strike? And wasn't that the original script? He went on to win an Oscar for the Clint Eastwood film, the one about the kid getting killed. What's it called? Sean Penn.
Oh, Jesus.
Mystic River.
Mystic River. Is that the way it happened? Was there a writer's strike and the script never got done, or is there more to that story?
It was.
Oh, you can tell it. This means you've got.
Kind of written by the crew. It was written by the crew.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an example of they went certain directions. You know, I hate to say this, but
Don't.
they went certain directions, and there was a scene that was cut out that was huge,
Yeah.
and it was all done with Tuesday night.
Uh-huh.
And it was when Tuesday night Stan is woken up, and she goes downstairs in her house, right?
Yeah.
And we have her house. We're in a lot on 3rd Street in downtown LA. We had a vacant lot, and we put up a facade of the Elm Street house.
Yeah.
The one that you see in Nightmare on Elm Street 4, which is interesting because, you know, the reason that you really know that that's a facade is because it has Klieg lights coming through the windows.
Oh.
I mean, think about it. Think about that photo that you've seen of it with her standing there
Yeah.
in front of it, and the light coming from the windows is like done in rays that are, you know, rays that are like shooting out like that. You can't do that if you don't have huge amount of space behind you, right?
Right.
So we built that facade, and then in front of it we built another facade that was the facade of her house. Okay?
Uh-huh.
And it was split in the middle, and it had a crane, basically a big bar with a crane holding and this is big stuff. I mean, really.
Yeah.
And the whole facade of the house, the idea was that we follow her down. Tuesday night opens the front door to her house. She comes out onto the porch. We're looking at her, and the crane goes up above her head as she hears like a scraping noise, and all of a sudden the camera slams back down. We've pulled her house away like this, and the Elm Street house is behind her. She starts to run towards the camera, away from the Elm Street house, into an Elm Street hallway that was built across the street, and the Elm Street door slams down, and she's trapped back in the Elm Street house.
Yeah.
So that was one shot. One shot. Took all day long to get that shot. The rigging for it was just amazing.
Gosh.
But they didn't use it in the film.
That's insane.
Yeah, it was a huge, expensive deal. But it's because they decided, and I'm not going to say why, because I don't know, but they decided that she wasn't going to be the final girl anymore.
Huh.
That it was
Money.
Lisa Wilcox.
Yeah.
It's a matter, I think, of kind of who's better.
Oh, really?
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to say, but that was the scuttlebutt at the time.
It's usually money, though, so maybe talent would win out on one thing, because it's usually because somebody wants another $50. Yeah.
But literally, the editor came up to my desk, and that was my thing. I mean, that was a huge piece of art department work. It was just it was a huge concentration. And the editor came in, and he had this round rolled up piece of film, and he slams it down on my desk about 3 weeks after we were done. He says, there's your shot. I go, what are you talking about? And he goes, well, he says, we wrote her out of the rest of the film. Basically, we're going to kill her off.
Yeah.
And I was like, are you kidding me? And that was it. And it was gone. So that gives you an idea of kind of the chaos of the filming itself, and how much the script would go one way and the script would go the other. And
Can I ask you another example of a movie that you worked on where that may have happened, if you have a story about it? Because you worked on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the original theatrical version.
I don't have stories for it.
Really?
Because, here's the weird thing. I worked on that. I worked on setting the film up.
Yeah.
I worked on it and in doing some of the rigging of it. But we were just at the very beginning of the film, as we were doing all the setups, a new the producer was fired and everybody went out with him, and it was a whole new group that came in and actually did the film.
Yeah, and like I said, Josh Whedon, who, everybody knows who Josh Whedon is now. Back then, he was very little known, and, he ended up walking off that movie because he, not only did they completely change his story, but he called Donald Sutherland a prick,
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
He hated Donald
And
Sutherland.
all of us, and we moved out with him and with his production company and all the rest, and that was it.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
So that's the way it goes.
I didn't know that story about Donald Sutherland.
Speaking
Yeah, he
of,
hates Donald Sutherland.
Speaking of vampires, another film that you worked on, Blade, which is now, I always give it credit. I think now we're in the heyday of comic book films.
Now we have been for probably.
Well, I was going to say, and you all beat it to the punch. I think that's why, I think that film got comics a lot more attention. Do you have any stories about Blade?
Blade was just a nightmare. I was working effects.
Is it because of Stephen Norrington?
You mean Dorf?
Oh, God,
No,
he's-
Stephen
the
Norrington, the director.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm going to tell you, the guy is a dick.
Well, he and Sean Connery got into it on League of Extraordinary Gentlemen
Yeah.
right after that.
I had a friend of mine. I actually walked off that film in the middle because of Norrington. I just couldn't take him anymore. I mean, he was just such a we had a rig that he had requested, which was this thing that was supposed to simulate a train bouncing a whole bunch of guys off, of the bad guys coming through the subway, right?
Right.
And what he wanted us to do was make a rig that would bounce them, right?
Yeah.
And we had to make this huge thing, and we had to run it down the tracks and set it up. And as soon as we set it up during lunch for him. And then he says, "I'm going to show you that we don't need any of this junk." He was such a dick to work with. You just have no idea. I mean, he was a horrible human being. In fact, I walked off the film. Most of my crew stayed on, and I actually think that Andre was one of them that set him up. So he said, "Well, I need to move this lamp," and so they said, "Well, put your hand right here where you want the lamp, and we'll mark it from the back." And then they went behind the flat and they drove a 3-inch screw through his hand from behind the flat. Dude, I'm telling you, on that film, one of the cameramen was shooting an overhead shot, and that guy jumped on Norrington from up there, from 15 feet up, jumped him and pulled him down. There was another case where where the key grip turned around and just punched him in the face and knocked him out. The whole grip department walked off of the film for 2 days, and they had to be negotiated back onto the set.
How the hell did he get the job? I always wonder about this. I mean, what's the movie
And
he did
got
before
more
that with
jobs.
Brad Dourif? It's the one. It's like Death Machine or something. Is the movie he did before that? Yeah. No, I wonder.
He was such a prick. I got to tell you that the thing is he wanted to prove, or he kept saying this, is that he wanted to prove that the American way of making films was broken, and that the way that British and the rest of America, the world, did films was better. But the problem is if you're the director on a film, you can pretty much prove it's broken pretty easily.
Yeah, you just don't. That makes sense.
Because all you have to do is take the train and steer it, into the rock. I mean, it ain't all that hard.
Well, it's not one of my favorite movies. You like it more than I do. I like the sequel by Del Toro much better. But how did it come out as well as it did?
Well, and that's actually one of my questions too, because it had a changed ending.
The ending for that thing was absolutely unknown while we were filming, and when I walked off, it was still unknown.
Yeah.
Nobody could figure it out. Nobody could figure out what they wanted to do. And the thing is, it was one of these cases of this. We don't know what we want to do, but we want it really big. Mm-hmm. So give us ideas that are really big. And then you'd give them ideas that are really big, and they would say, "Well, we can't do that. That would cost money." And it was just shitty. It was the whole thing. The whole time you got this feeling that you were locked in the middle of a horrible battle, and that you couldn't get out.
So was that just one of those happy accidents that it came out as well as it did? That it was a success?
Yeah. Basically.
I don't know if it's true. You would know better than I would, but I heard some people have said that movie owes a little bit to Wesley Snipes wanting it to be something. That as an actor, he wanted it to be something.
He was counting on it for his return, because he was up until that point, his career had just really kind of dived and
Passenger 57, 1600 Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
But that's.
Yeah.
That's I just wanted to ask questions about it because the alternate ending that they did for the DVD, which looks like they spent some money on, where he actually becomes the Blood God, and Blade has to fight him, and then it sets up another villain at the end of it, which they never go back to because they changed the ending. But I just wondered about that because it seems like the more I watched about how that got made, the more I was like, I still don't know how this got made.
What the thing is that I don't think I've ever had a film where so many people walked off, so many people, were just crying. I mean, literally crying. You would walk into somebody's office and they would be crying.
I would hope Stephen Norrington cried when you put a nail through his hand.
I hope so. I give you an example of the way that this guy would do things. He changed if you say in wardrobe, we're going to have these cop uniforms, right? Okay. For instance, in that big scene where the wall of the subway blows out, right? And all the cops are there. Okay? And there's the, I don't know, I haven't seen it in a long time.
I haven't either.
But in that scene, there's 30 cops, right? And they all die, in the middle of, and they all have squibs on them.
Yeah.
The night before we did that scene, he decided to change the uniforms. Now, here's the thing: is that means that the wardrobe people then have to take all these uniforms, 3 takes of uniforms. That's 100 uniforms. They have to get 100 uniforms, and we as effects people had to rig them, right? And it's just it was a logistic nightmare. And I have to say, is the producers never said no to the guy.
Well,
they never turned around and said, "This is fucking ridiculous."
I was about to ask you about that because that's a New Line picture. Why didn't Bob Shea or somebody come down and just say no?
Well, I put it on the head of Bob Engelman. Bob Engelman was the line producer.
Okay.
And he never said no. And the thing is he told me at the beginning of the film, he said that, I really want to see. I really have noticed that. Of the films that I've done, because I work with Bob a lot, the ones that were the biggest battle came out to be the best films. And it was it's just something that he said. But I have to tell you, on that film, I had a feeling that he was the fomenter of the chaos.
Yeah.
That he was just letting it happen. I think that he thought that it was going to make a great film. And, it came out to be a pretty good film.
I mean, it's okay. It was a successful film.
It was a successful film.
Yeah, and launched a couple more. I have 2 questions, and I know we're going to talk about some other movies, and I'll put off one of them till later. But who is another person, a director that was problematic? It's maybe not as bad as Stephen Norrington. You obviously have
Chuck Russell.
Who?
Oh, I should have thought about that longer.
No,
Chuck
I didn't
Russell.
hear.
Chuck Russell.
Chuck Russell was Charles Russell.
But you know what? Here's the thing. Let me tell you something. Chuck Russell was a prick.
Okay,
but,
I've never met him.
But in the end, he got the job done.
Okay.
I think that he was pushing and pushing and pushing, and it's not that we were trying to build a small film. It's just that we were budgeted to build a small film.
Right. And he was trying to get the most out of it.
And wait, just so the people who are listening to this podcast aren't familiar, who is Chuck Russell?
He directed Nightmare on Elm Street 3. He would later direct the remake of The Blob.
Okay.
Eraser with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Something Bless the Child, the Kim Basinger film.
Yeah.
Christina Ricci.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's who this is. Yeah.
So continue on.
So I he was difficult to deal with. My sister used to say this about him, that if you said no to Chuck and the producer said no to Chuck, he would go and he would start asking the janitor to do it for him. I mean, the guy really just kind of was push. And I remember Roy Wagner was on set with the DP. Roy Wagner was the DP.
Okay.
And he's just the sweetest guy in the world. And he came out off of the mirror set, with all the. You remember the mirror hallway, right?
Mm-hmm.
He walked out of it one time, and there was like this little 1 gallon bucket with paint in it.
Yeah.
And he kicked it as hard as he possibly could. It went just as I was coming down. It went over my head, spilling a stream of paint on me. It went right out and back behind me. So that was the kind of tension that was on that one. So,
Wow.
those it stands to this day that those two guys, Steve Norrington and Chuck Russell, are probably not my favorites to work with.
Well, I was kind of curious, and I'm maybe belaboring the point. Was it just because he was trying to get the most out of it, or was he just not a nice person, Chuck Russell?
Just not a nice person about doing it.
Yeah.
About the way that he did it.
Right. So you don't mind him trying to get. Go ahead.
Norrington was a complete flaming asshole from the word go.
Right.
Just Norrington. The thing, and I say this often, that I'm a gun control kind of guy. I really believe in it and all the rest of that. But Britain has complete gun control,
Right.
and it makes it so that, let's face it, the population doesn't get thinned out. So if Steve Norrington were born in Texas, he would have never lived long enough
He
to
never would have
direct
made it out of Texas.
anything.
Yeah, he never would have made it out of Texas.
He never would have made it out of Texas. So
I understand.
My wife gets completely blown away by a British accent, and yet I worked in the film business, and I know what a British accent means.
What does it mean?
It means I'm a privileged prick.
Here in America, to take American studio money.
That's right. That's
Right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And the thing is there are more fake British accents in LA than anywhere in the world.
Yep. I don't doubt that. What are some other?
I mean, if you're a musician and you're a guitarist and you don't have a fake British accent, you're just not working. You're unemployed.
So I've seen you mention this movie in some of your posts on Facebook. Also, it's one of the staples of my childhood, and I've actually brought it up. I've actually brought it up on a few podcasts that we've done. The movie Witchboard.
Witchboard, yes. Kevin Tinney.
Yeah.
By the way, Kevin Tinney, I don't know him. I am friends with him on Facebook. I know people who know him. Will not respond about doing our show, so I'm just going to throw that out there. There's a couple other people that won't talk to Three Hicks from Kentucky either. Mick Garris, and a couple others.
Hey, just show him this, and he'll definitely not do your show.
Maybe we can get Stephen Norrington.
Maybe we're gonna get Stephen Norrington. Will you come on and defend yourself against Mick Strawn? Well, I don't know who that asshole thinks he was. But yeah, no. Anyway, Kevin Tinney's.
I worked Witchboard with Tazzle Bauer. I was doing assistant effects, and Tazzle Bauer was doing was the coordinator, and it was just the two of us, and we had a blast. I mean, really, it was a lot of fun.
No, did you work on Night? I don't have it. Did you work on his follow up, Night of the Demons?
No,
Andre did.
Andre did.
I believe did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Andre did. Yeah,
I think.
Okay. I was curious.
By the way, Andre, if you listen to this and you didn't, I'm sorry.
No, what's another one?
Oh, I mean, we've got
Tons.
Candyman.
Candyman.
Oh yeah, Candyman seems to be an essential question.
Doesn't that? It's also directed by a British bastard, right? Candyman.
Candyman. Yeah.
I love it when you have that face. It means there's going to be a good story.
Okay. Here's what happened. By the time we got to Candyman, I had sort of become a fixer. I would come in when our department had just gone completely crazy, right?
Uh-huh.
And so I came in and I set a deal, and I said, well, what are your problems? I mean, you want to replace the whole art department? He says, well, if and the producers are saying, yeah, if you have to, if you must, you must. And I was, well, I don't know. I mean, this thing's like 2/3 of the way finished. We're on stage. What possibly could be going on that would make you want to replace your art department now? And the producer goes, well, I mean, there's personality conflicts. So we sat down, we set a deal, right? And so I go out onto the stage to see what's going on. And we're in this beautiful apartment set. I walk onto the stage, and as I walk onto the stage, this DP, this older looking gentleman, comes running around the corner of the flat, and I was surprised because he was moving so fast. And as you came into the stage, there was the coffee, the craft services was over here, and the coffee machine was on the corner here. And he comes in and he grabs the regular coffee pot and books it and goes back around the corner. And I go, well, what the hell is that? And so I walk around the corner to find the entire crew in the middle of the room, the entire crew waiting, set up on a shot, but in front is not the actors, but is the production designer with the decaf and the DP with the regular, and them slinging hot coffee at each other. Yeah, exactly.
That's a hostile work environment.
Only in the movies, by the way.
And screaming, just screaming at each other at the top of their lungs, and the crew absolutely had a look on their faces that said, this is just another day of this, right? And I turned back around and I walked back to the producer's office. I closed the door behind me. I sat down and I said, well, guess what? We're gonna double my pay.
I don't blame you.
And I walked out, and I didn't replace them so much as I spent the rest of the film doing my best to separate those two from each other.
Yeah.
I mean, I did worked as production designer for the rest of it, and kind of just made sure that the two of them didn't mix with each other, and I don't even know what credit I took on the film, but that was my job on that.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So,
do you know why? What started it, or is it just a personality conflict that just escalated?
well, she was a jerk. Let's see. I don't know how a person becomes but she was I worked with her later on, and I can't think of her name, but I worked with her later on as an art director also, and I can tell you a story about that. She had some neon made, and we were in Portland. We were filming in Portland. She had some neon made at a local shop, and the local shop wrote into their contract that it was going to cost us $100 every time she walked in to complain. They literally put this in the contract, that it was going to cost $100 every time she walked in to bitch at them about and at the very end, I signed a $1,600 deal for a $300 piece of neon. So, and the thing is the producer. This is how well the producer knew her at that point, that he okayed it also. Said, no problem. We're considering that cheap. Okay, that was her. The DP was just on set after another in a series of rehab stints, and he was one of these guys. Okay, well, set the camera back up over there, and just always rubbing his face, and yeah, it was intense. Let's put it that way. Their demons were just smacking each other all the time, boy.
I had this question earlier, and it's more maybe of a feeling of mine, but I feel you were talking about you had a bigger budget for production design, right? And art department and all these things, and you want to make these movies. Right. What'd you say? Oh, we were talking about Nightmare earlier.
Which Nightmare?
Was it 3 or 4?
I believe it was 4.
Was it 4?
Because he didn't have a script.
Yeah.
So
you didn't have a script, and nobody really said no when you were building these things, and you know
right.
Right. Horror films now, they're so micro budgeted that I think, and it's probably true of Saw and a lot of them, the money's not spent on the movie, it's spent on the advertising campaign.
Right.
I just wanted your opinion on that. I just, it's.
Well, that was the 80s were the time of the big, the late 80s. Horror films grew up.
Yeah.
They started to. I mean, let's face it. Before that, the most money ever spent on a horror film, you'd have to go all the way back to Universal Pictures and the classics, right?
Right.
Every horror film made between then and up until the 80s was basically made by Corman, or it was made by little companies that.
Yeah, I believe Bruce Campbell is quoted as saying, if you worked in horror movies in the early 80s, you were basically might as well have been considered a porn star at that point in time.
Exactly, you were barely a step above porn.
Yeah,
and sometimes you were using the same sets.
I've heard that before. Well, and that's probably true of Val Lewton pictures as well. I mean, Val Lewton made a career out of making nothing, like Cat People and For Shadows and things, and they were low budget and just building it all on atmosphere.
But as you started to get into the 80s, there was an evolution that happened, and we were part of that evolution. I mean, hell, we were,
New Line was the evolution.
Yeah.
It was the evolution.
New Line was the evolution.
Looking at 3 and 4, like the Nightmare grew right there as those films did, and they grew in popularity, and Freddy became an icon. Freddy became, and Freddy was to horror of the 80s and 90s and 2000s, and even now to a certain extent, Freddy was Vincent Price.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was more of it became pop culture.
Right, it became pop culture. I mean, there wasn't a horror film that was pop culture other than Vincent Price himself. That was it. That was your pop culture reference to horror was Vincent Price. Up until that point, and then from then on, it became big business, and we were right on the cusp of it.
It cut across everything too. You had rap videos with Freddy. You had
right.
But you did the Fat Boys video, right?
Right, exactly.
You did the Fat Boys video? Do you have a Fat Boys story?
Yeah. Those guys are great. Listen. Doing the Fat Boys video and sitting in the parking lot with the 3 of them, and they were sitting on these little tiny scooters, right? and I had one, and they had one. We're all just hanging in the parking lot. And we got into the weirdest discussion. We got into who was the baddest. Was it Michael Myers? Or was it Leatherface? Or was it Freddy? Right? And they discussed it seriously for like 45 minutes or so. And then the one that was the shortest and the widest. With the gold. He turns. I'll never forget this. He turns around and he stopped the whole argument by going like this. He goes, gotta be Freddy, and it's gotta be Freddy, and you know why it's gotta be Freddy? Because he get you in your dreams, man. He get you in your dreams, and how are you gonna fight that?
And there you have it. What other questions do we have? And there
you have it. You know what? I gotta tell you, the wisdom that guy put out was, Yes, I still think to this day it's a pretty damn good argument.
Well, yeah. I think the other ones you don't like. I never worry about Jason Voorhees. I see a sign that says Camp Crystal Lake. I'm not going.
Exactly.
I'm not going to an abandoned gas station in Texas. So Leatherface.
The kids in the 30s and 40s were having the same arguments about the Mummy and the Wolfman and Dracula and Frankenstein. It's the same thing.
But Freddy. Get you in your dream.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. That's true.
And you gotta sleep.
You gotta sleep sometime.
We're almost an hour in. Anything else?
I mean, if he has some stories about Tales from the Dark Side or Rings of the Musketeers,
guys,
I don't even know what Rings of the Musketeers.
You know that I've got stories forever.
Well,
you guys just promote my Dream Warrior review. Promote my book.
Yeah, we will.
We will.
And when you're close, I owe you dinner.
Yes, we will.
We do. We need to do dinner when you're close, and hopefully you'll be at a con. Go ahead.
You know what else you could do is you could talk to Layla Cook and get her to bring me out to Scarefest again.
Hey, brother, if I had. I won't do it on here. We'll do it off record somewhere. And it's not that Scarefest is great to us, and they really are. I will tell people on and off the record anywhere. But if I had any input in that, it would look different. There would be a lot more writers. There would be a lot more directors. There would be a lot more production people there.
That's one of the things that I've always
have the best stories if you're into filmmaking. For people who are actually into films and filmmaking.
This is nothing against actors. I love actors. I mean, I have to. But the thing is their stories are always related to their experience on a film, which is just the tip of the iceberg.
And they're out in their trailer, except for the 2 hours that they're on set. They've even got somebody doing the stand-in, doing the lighting for them.
And let me tell you who put it best was Max von Kleven. Max von Kleven was a director that was known for doing Second Unit. And he said to me, he would say this when we did the Second Unit for Runaway Train. And he would say, "Boys, we're the ones that are on the trailer."
Yep.
Second Unit makes the trailer. That's
right.
Absolutely the truth.
Absolutely true. All the action scenes, all the stuff that people want to see, right?
That's right.
That's right. All right. Well, I hate to do it there, but we're an hour in. We're going to have you back on again in a couple of months because we always love. We're going to talk about Tales from the Dark Side. What was the other one?
Ring of the Musketeers. Ring of the Musketeers. 8 heads in a duffel bag. Kazam.
We do.
New Zealand by itself.
Well,
we gotta talk about New Zealand sometime.
Yes.
Before we go, I do want to close this out. My father has never taken any interest in anything that I've done.
Ever. Even the kids. Even his grandchildren.
He's vaguely aware that he has grandkids. But I did want to share this with you over the Christmas holiday. He said, some of my cousins, his nieces and nephews, say, "You do this podcast thing. What's that about?" And so, we talk to different people. We talk about pop culture. And he said, "Well, tell me about the best one you did." And I actually played him some of yours. My father is very, very... he was always kind of a stern father. He's relaxed now that he's older. He laughed, and he said, what you went through on the set of Boogie Nights, he said, that man deserved an Oscar. If he doesn't have an Oscar for going through that. So I wanted to share that with you. You made my father laugh harder than I've heard him laugh in years. And he said, those years I worked in a factory don't seem so bad now. So thank you for that from my father.
Thank you, Mick, for everything that you've done for us. We really appreciate it, and we always love having you on the show. And we always talk about when we meet people, when we talk about conventions, hey, you need more production people. Hey, there's this guy. We know a guy. Great storyteller. So thank you so much for all the support you've given.
Thanks a lot, guys. You know that I totally love it when we get together.
I know, and we love hanging out with you. Thanks for talking to Three Hicks from Kentucky.
And being very patient through technical difficulties.
Yeah, we're an hour late taping this because we just needed to restart the computer.
Hey, listen, I've been hung up by more technical difficulties in my life than you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, you're in production. It's nothing but a technical difficulty.
You know, there's two lies that I've told through my life consistently. The first one is, "Honey, I'll be home in an hour."
Yeah.
Which, hell, that never happened. The second one was standing on set when something goes wrong, and they would turn to you and go, "Well, how long is it going to take?" And you go, 10 minutes. Always
10 minutes.
You just see that their faces and just go, "Oh God, not 10 minutes." Yes,
Yeah.
10 minutes.
All right.
Because they know when you say 10 minutes, they know exactly what you mean. I have no idea.
Well, thank you so much. That wraps up this episode of Bonehead. Tune in and go to your podcast where?
Dream Warrior Review.
Got it. Dream Warrior Review. Thank you all so much.
If you think that this was funny, I saved the good stuff for us.
Yeah.
You jerk!
I'm going to cut you, you son of a bitch. Thanks to everybody. That's Bonehead. We're out. All right, are we ready?
We are ready.
All right, we're ready to go. You ready to go?
Right?
All right, we'll see you later.
That was the episode.
Great
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think we did really well.